Welcome to the panel discussion on securing remote workforce access by leveraging the power of identity management. As you know, identity has been a long, topic. I have been working on identity side for at least the last, 20 years, and it has really evolved over a period of time. In today's time, in the true digital era where we're all, accustomed to now working from home, working from remote locations, identity is obviously playing a tremendous role in making sure that we secure our workforce access to systems, to resources, to data, to applications, and even assets, if I may add. So identity has obviously become a fundamental layer. And it is important for all organizations, big and small, to consider an identity solution and to manage the right identity for its assets. So let me start. Let me start by asking my friends here as to how this pandemic or this shift in basically the new normal, which we've been which we've seen, which is really working from the remote workforce, has changed the way we are handling identity, or if I may say so, how has that impacted the identity strategy for our organization? So let me start that with maybe Shrihari, maybe you want to take a stab at this first, followed by Shrikant.
Right, very important question that when this COVID started, right? So I was traveling that time, and so typically the question asked that from tomorrow we are not going to no one will be allowed to enter the Reliance Corporate Park, right? Exactly a year before, when we are actually working on a strategy on the remote working, typically question came that is the remote access is permitted in a banking environment, right? So typically you have in banking, you have a call center, you have back-end operations, you have recon and settlement, and you have treasury operations. All these things actually work typically in a closed very secured environment. So typically working from remotely working from home is a big shock actually, or paradigm shift, right? So fortunately we had a strategy that as a backup strategy, and we have actually kept the remote access a possibility, or from technology point of view and process point of view. But only thing is, we could not, allow anyone to work remotely because of how a banking environment works, right? This is one shift. Second shift is actually that the authentication, right? So you have all types of authentication in a banking environment. For example, the people who work in the core banking and all, they require biometric readers. So now, one thing is allowing someone to work from home. Second thing is how do we extend the different types of multi-factor authentications. Some application require biometric access, some require like you have developers, etc. You have to quickly onboard them for a different types of MFA, etc. So this was another challenge, right? And at the same time, you have to ensure that the data leakage is not possible. Like the very sensitive data people deal with, like particularly the recon and settlement process and treasury operations, right? They work with the crores of rupees actually every day, and you can't have any data leakage actually with this work from
correct.
All these challenges actually we quickly overcome, and of course there were challenges, and we quickly mobilize the resources, and actually now all these operations are working from home.
Perfect. Shrikant, the very same question for you, but I know you're a different industry. Shrihari comes from banking. You're a manufacturing entity, and a completely different impact for you. So how did the identity strategy change?
Yes, as Shrihari said, remote workers is definitely is a requirement in that case. Since in this pandemic, Gartner says economic rules, IIM is very important in this current situation. Since a lot of new digital hardwares and softwares are started implementing, and the cloud environment also started. There's a lot of challenges in that also. So increasing the remote connectivity is more, and a lot of collaboration tools also are started with some of them IoTs and other kind of things, stuff started with. There are a lot of challenges in that case. So IIM is essential for remote, but how you are going to control and how you are going to manage that. That is very, very important. Is digital transformation work.
Absolutely, absolutely, Shrikant. Great. Rohan, same question to you. From the other side of the spectrum. So while
Sure.
I've got
Sure.
the CISO speaking.
Yeah, so I do concur with what they said, right? So remote workforce is a huge thing. The ability for people to connect remotely to their corporate assets also took center stage. Now, here's a huge problem. When we talk in terms of remote access, a lot of organizations, in fact, almost all organizations use tools like VPN. It could be VPN via the web, or it could be VPN via a fat client. And of course, in order to secure your perimeter, you adopt things like MFA, 2FA, your hard tokens, your RSA secure ID, in order to ensure that the person who's trying to connect to your corporate infrastructure or within your perimeter is actually the person who claims to be who he is. Now, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that most of the people in the IT sector have got absolutely no problems using things like RSA tokens or secure IDs or two-factor authentication or MFA. But you see, a majority of the workforce are not technical per se. You've got people in the back office, you've got people in marketing, you've got people in sales, you've got people from all other departments who are not really IT literate. So when there came a time where there was a sudden shift from working in the office to working from home, what we noticed is that a lot of organizations started getting calls to the call center. I am trying to connect. I don't know what my 2FA is. Where do I get my RSA token from? What is my remote access password? What is my corporate password? I forgot my remote access password. Can you reset it for me? So the costs that organization had to manage and maintain just shot through the roof, because the call centers were now busy either shipping out two-factor tokens to their users or resetting users' passwords. So what we saw in this entire shift, paradigm shift from working from office to a remote workforce, is that it became extremely difficult for organizations to actually manage remote connectivity. People had internet issues, bandwidth issues, two-factor issues, MFA issues, and at the same time, there is absolutely no assurance that the person logging on with a user ID and password per se is actually the person who you issued the credential to. And that's when we saw a lot of organizations come to us, because we provide a passwordless journey for the remote workforce, where you could actually leverage a person's own mobile device, which a person is very comfortable using, to literally scan a QR code and log in using his live biometrics. So taking a paradigm shift from going from a password world to a passwordless journey, securing your organization's perimeter right at the firewall level or right at the entry point, took center stage for most of the organizations that we have been working with.
Perfect, Ron. Yes, I think we're also seeing the same shift as part of Deloitte. We've seen a lot of clients come back and say, hey, how can we have a technology intervention which provides an easy access to the assets of the organization? The two-factor, the tokens have become a bit cumbersome. So everybody's looking for a much more convenient solution to look at. So I'm going to pose, Shishir, as part of TCS, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of clients. What are you seeing as a trend within this? And how is this identity adoption actually moving for organizations? So what are you seeing? You're seeing what kind of adoption which is happening?
Yeah, so basically, if you're looking for typically our delivery model, we have like offices and like across pan India, and their office are pretty much. There are multiple level of security was already there, like a physical security, network level security, and security even for a specific floor which is for a specific customer. So there are multiple level of physical security was already there apart from the network security. So once it was decided around a year back that everybody is moving home, and definitely for our customers, definitely we need to provide the same secure way of environment to cater their needs. So basically, it was pretty much a tough decision, but definitely being as a mature organization, VDI is pretty much deployed across organization. That really help us. So instead of moving actual physical devices, which is having all the customer data as a customer application, we provided the like a VPN connectivity with our employees or our associate with multiple level authentication. After that, they are reaching into VDI, and VDI we are able to provision whatever they have it. And apart from this, before connected to VDI, there are multiple level security checks are there, whether the end user device which is registered with the organization or not. And initially, definitely as a start, there was a personal devices, but down the line, because it is stretched along, we move everything to the organization device, then security is strengthened more. And apart from this, some of the other control deployed even for the VDI, there will be no data copy between two devices. Because if I am serving any customer, the data protection is also our responsibility. So we need to put some, we put additional layer of security in terms of identity and access. So multiple level authentication is one of the thing, and definitely which really help us as an organization. We can say more than 95% associates are across globe are working from remote, and they are pretty much secure. And business is becoming it's not a new normal for us. You can say.
Yeah, it was actually amazing how we all moved to remote working in a matter of weeks. And I really give full credit to all the IT professionals which enabled that. I remember last year, same time, March, we were scrambling for resources, how we moved, laptops, desktops, all home, and we enabled our professionals to be so adaptive to working from home. And I do remember one of the basic things like Wi-Fi adapter cards were missing from desktops, and a lot of the IT professionals had to arrange for Wi-Fi adapters as well, right? Because otherwise they all had Ethernet cards, the desktops primarily. Tarun, that brings me to this point, right? With this entire set of remote workforce. When you are sitting in an office, you're able to apply a lot of these policies within the network. Now you're remote, and therefore your ability to bypass some of the policies, etc., is pretty. You can actually do that in some cases. So how do you end up securing some of that endpoints?
Sure, Gautam, and it's indeed a big challenge to address, right? And when we're talking of workforce which are pretty large and huge and geographically distributed as such, there are a few things that were put in place, right? I mean, Shashi spoke about VDI-based access, and Rohan brought on a point around how they've moved to passwordless based access controls and perimeter security, all of that, right? But I think there are a couple of additional points to it, right? So one is, and critical points that we have seen is around mobile device management, right? And mobile device management, because as we started scrambling through, most people started with what we call as the bring your own device. Business has to go on, resiliency being prime. Everybody started with bring your own device, right? So the first thing that we swung into action was around ensuring that mobile device management is in place, which means we started to track who is accessing them. Okay. And with cloud being a great technology enabler, we could essentially use some of our cloud technologies as well as AI to look at, well, is this device being accessed far more often? Can we look and say this is a corporate device, or it's a personal device that's authenticated once, previously, right? And things around that. So we swung into kind of a bit of mobile device management, right? Using our identity cloud services in the cloud. So cloud is a great enabler for us. And apart from that, we also moved on to essentially the MFA and all that is given, right? And we are moving into upstream IAM solutions around it. But what we also added was a bit of behavioral sciences to it. We also started to track that with a single user access, you cannot have two people, same user IDs and authentication being accessed from two different locations, which is not possible, right? So we used a bit of behavioral sciences into IAM strategies as well to do that. So it's
a lot of analytics, yeah. Okay, perfect, Tarun. So applying a lot of cloud-based technologies and analytics. One of the other aspect which obviously we can explore in case of remote working is the concept of the zero trust strategy. Ajit, I'm going to move to you for this question. It's right up your area of working. So how can how does zero trust strategy help businesses to secure the enterprise digital assets or the remote working ecosystem?
That's a good question, Gautam. So as you start to say, we are going through a business transformation, a digital transformation. We went through a security transformation. If you look at the name itself, right? If you look at the name, identity and access management, we were so focused on access management. Last year, we became security experts in a hurry. So now identity is as much about security. Identity and access management is as much about security as it is about access management. And when you look at the things that Rohan said, all the support challenges, all the requirements that people had around how do I get my MFA token, and you look at Tarun's point about adding behavioral sciences, Zero Trust brings all of those together because the goal is to tie identity, the people, the workloads, the endpoints, and the network in some cohesive form. Now, for most organizations, that's really hard. So you have to say, okay, now we have to combine identity, who it is. Is it a privileged user? Is it a finance user? Behavior, are they coming from a corporate device? Are they coming from, are they coming external, internal? Risk, are they accessing a sensitive application? You have to combine static and dynamic aspects. So with Zero Trust, what you're able to do is to combine these static components and dynamic components. I know risk of an application, but I don't know whether this person came from a managed device or an unmanaged device. So if you can do all of those, you have to then say, okay, for my users, it has to be frictionless. Because the users, to Rohan's point, they're not technical. So you cannot always say, I'm going to do MFA on you, I'm going to do MFA on you. You have to find a way to reduce the friction because they want to do their jobs. So what we've tried to do is to say you add identity, behavior, risk on one side, and you add a set of responses on the other. And the responses are not always allow or deny. It may be allow, deny, multi-factor, re-authenticate, isolate, SMS, text. Then you tie it with a policy. Because if you do that, then you can say things like, if a person's coming from a new device, change of behavior, and they're an executive, and they're going to a sensitive application, I'll force an MFA. If one of my service accounts behaves interactively, let me block it or have someone else authorize it. You can start to do these kinds of things. So you're getting Zero Trust because you're assuming breach, but you're also reducing the friction for your users. So if you combine those two things, then the users won't be upset. When you do challenge them, they know there's a good reason you're challenging them. And that's how I think organizations are going to start to do it. You have to assume that when a person comes in from a remote device, they have MFA and come into your organization, you have to assume that they may have gone to a website that downloaded malware. Now that malware wakes up after you've done your MFA. And so if the behavior changes after that, you should be able to cause an MFA at that time during the authorization process, not just the authentication process. And to do all of those things, Zero Trust is going to enable you to do it. There's different ways. Different vendors have different approaches to do it. But if you combine endpoints, people, networks, and workloads, you can actually come up with a very cohesive policy. The only thing I would say to most organizations is before you start to go out and build these proactive policies, just understand and get visibility. Because once you get visibility, you can reduce your attack surface. Don't try to do too complex things. Just get a better sense of who's doing what. Then you can know when you've been breached. Then you can start to take proactive policies. So it's a journey for most organizations, Zero Trust.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't think you'll do it in a month or 6 months.
Oh, absolutely. It's a journey. Absolutely. It's going to evolve and it's going to obviously become more and more technology dependent as well as we go through.
Right.
Thanks so much for that, Ajit. I'm going to move to Mehriar. Mehriar, one of the fundamental concept within identity and access is the concept of least privileges, right? So we always say give the individual the privileges which is commensurate with the role of the individual, and give him the minimum privileges, nothing more, nothing less, right? So how do you think that has changed in this remote working scenario, and what can we do to make sure that every individual in an organization has this least privileges concept implemented? I can tell you it's not easy to implement. It's never easy to implement this, but your experience, Mehriar.
So before I go ahead and answer that, Gautam, I just wanted to context on the previous question that you have asked. Please
go ahead, Mehriar, please.
I think every organization has to first check and identify where they are and which industry segment they belong to. Because technology has to make things easier for your users to work on.
Yeah.
See, we people working in the IT team, we know the nuances, we know the problems. So we seldom complain, right? And today, when we are into a journey of say 1 year down the line of COVID situation, we need to really go on the drawing board and see that what is going to be our 3 years roadmap on an identity access management as a long-term statistics for us. That is going to be a very important part. The other point is that what is the data which you hold and which you run internally as well as externally? That would be answering most of your questions. So if I'm in a banking situation, my data is exposed not only to internal but my external users. So probably ILM could be the most important strategy to be implemented. I think the other parts which come in later, access points, tokens, password related situation, all those things would come in peripheral as to what technology that you would implement. So today I will put myself into a shoes of looking at this roadmap. I would say that I would bifurcate them into different buckets of layers and access related to it. So internal users are my users which fall into an access level, which will fall into one bucket. My technology, people who work with me, who implement this solution and they operate on this system, another bucket. And people who connect from outside to access my data into another bucket. So these three would form my buckets of situation to look at data as a usage pattern, as an access pattern, and then how do I grant access? So coming back to your question, Gautam, today, most of the threats emanate inside. I think most of the compromises happen from internal situations, and that needs to be controlled. I think what is very important is today trust factor becomes very important, but a trust factor, even if it is said that I have a trust and he compromises, could be a situational problem. So I feel the best part that we have done is that access level at an administrative level is provided to multiple people in my organization. When I say multiple, it could be 3 or 4 critical people who handle administrative situations. Also, the administrative critical factors need an access at one layer above. So I would say that administrators have an access which needs to be conquered by the CISO level as well. So I would see that almost 25, 30 or 30% of your administrative level situations can be controlled at the CISO level as a second level of authentication. That could be one of the important points that we have also done in our organization. We have identified those points which are very, very critical, and those critical points, if compromised today, it could lead to a failure of your security services for your organization. And that is a very important point. So I think
sure.
That is something we have done internally to take care of this particular point.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I'm going to move on back. We've got the whole circle. So Shriyari, back to you. As this remote working has grown, Shriyari, you would also realize that the cloud environment and the adoption of cloud has grown. And what has happened is that there is a separate set of identity management for cloud environment. The enterprise is running on another set. So there seems to be like a 2 set of identity systems which are running, and that becomes a little difficult to manage things like RBAC, role-based access controls, segregation of duties. So any good practices, Shriyari, which you want to talk about? How do you manage these diverse set of environment through a single layer of identity and access?
So I will actually a little bit customize this question actually, because bank doesn't have much, cloud presence. Obviously, I think many banks, it's the same thing. So what you have, touched upon the very right thing. I think, like in one of the, Mr. Ajit has covered it. So there are 2 things. One is identities and second is actually access required, right? So we have identities actually, they can be partners, they can be internal employees, and within the internal employees, which operation they do. Actually, as I mentioned, there are some critical operations like recon and settlement and back office operations. Everyone's identity and the process of identity management or identities level of identities, right, are the different actually. Like for example, some people require biometric access, some require multi-factor authentication, some require second factor authentication like a mobile based, OTP based, etc. So based on the role and based on the the access required, that different identity management is actually implemented. Second thing is access management. For example, we have developers from third parties who need to access only the development servers only. They don't need to access the production systems, right? Similarly, we have actually people who require only production access. And as you mentioned, some of the administrators who require only admin access. They may not be accessing the production data, but they'll be having admin access, right? So there is a challenge that how do we segregate their duties, restrict them or actually provide the access control only to the respective areas. So that is actually access management challenges have to be taken care. So this we have done it through actually extremely narrowing down the access management systems, right? So the developers VPN is different, back office operations VPNs are different, right? Like that we have created different things so that for example call centers, right? So call centers access specific systems, and now they are working from home, right? So their access is limited. So this is actually a combination of the identities and access management and the privileges of the people. So we had to quickly take certain calls, and we had to quickly educate our people. We had to minimize the access, elevate the access, etc. So all these calls were taken very quickly, within a 2 weeks period. And now it's streamlined. Actually, now people used to work from home, and so far,
sure.
No cribblings actually. So
perfect. Tarun, you mentioned about cloud in the earlier part of the discussion. Any good practices which you want to share as to how these diverse, two systems could be managed under a single identity solution?
Sure. So our posture, our security posture is, if you have two different systems, cloud and on-premise, we generally try to integrate and interface it together, right?
Yeah.
So as a technology, you can have one identity provider, let's say the cloud provider being your primary provider, and you can actually interface with your on-premise system through an application gateway, right? We call it the app gate, right? So you have a single provider from an identity standpoint, while you have the cloud applications, the SaaS applications or PaaS applications, which essentially connects to your identity cloud service. And then you have the on-premise systems, which interfaces through the app gateway. And we have these deployed at multiple customer locations, managing this hybrid environment, right? But I think the most important aspect to it is around the process where we look at identities. Are these unique identities? Because what we have seen is a sprawl of these spurious, these bogus identities on premise. And when we start to interface, these identities could be used by internal systems, as Mr. Merrier mentioned, right? The internal attacks. So while we interface the cloud and the on-premise into a hybrid environment, we also have to go through a process through which we remove these bogus identities as well, right? So yes, AppGet is the way to go. And I firmly believe in the power of cloud and how the hybrid world will evolve. The hybrid identity world will evolve. And our identity cloud services does that really well.
Right. Merrier, you've raised a hand. You want to add? You want to chime in?
Yeah. So this basically operations which you've asked, a very relative question is, today organizations operate on-premise, multiple cloud setups, private, public, and that is a big concern today. So Gautam, I just wanted to advise you that we had evaluated certain tools. And there is a wonderful tool called OneLogin, ONE login, which basically does management of multiple IAM situations. See, today I can't deploy people to handle IAM at internal or private cloud, public cloud setups, and it becomes a very, very difficult thing to manage. And especially when you have people internally managing those, situations. So my advice in a situation like this is, there is a lot of SaaS-based services which are available today and which are easy and simple to deploy. Obviously, one needs to really be diligent in terms of looking at how it will fit into your organizational needs. That's all I wanted to say.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of technology solutions, where we can integrate, and I think Tarun mentioned about it as to how a cloud and an on-prem integration can happen to give a seamless, identity, experience. Moving on, I think, Maria, you mentioned, and then Shriari also mentioned about it. The keys to the kingdom is really held by the administrators, and obviously, working from remote, we are asking these administrators to, manage a lot of this, environment, and it obviously becomes challenging to ensure security and make sure that there is no data breach because of this access which they have. So I'm going to ask this to multiple. This is a very, very pertinent and important question, because really everything boils down to the data. How the access to the data is happening, and whether the right person has the the right set of access to the assets, which could include any set of an asset within an organization. So, Shrikant, you want to take a stab at it first, and then we can go to Shishir and Rohan.
Yeah, see, as Magar said, data is very, very important. That is the information we gather, because to a lot of breaches happening on this data only. Based on the data, how your breaches is happening. So how you are going to control, how you are going to protect, based on the tools and technologies, how you are going to regularly audit and monitor that controls. So that's the main area where you have to focus on when you are giving an access to a administrator. Administrator privilege should be there only to the admin. You should not share or anything. So that should be multi-factor authentication, and a single sign-on should be there, and that should be my audit mechanism should be there to monitor and find out where that performance and any other kind of segments or any kind of focus that is very, very critical in this cloud or any other environment.
Perfect. Shishir, your experience on managing administrative.
Yeah, so one thing is, any data is available in any organization, in any form. We should the data classification is pretty much important, because being as an admin role, anything people can come across access to data. One thing is data classification. Other thing is user awareness about the data privacy, and GDPR is also in place right now. The refresher course every 6 months, or based on the spending situation, could be every 3 months. The way organization policy processes are getting changed, each user, not only the administrator, every user should be about their consent, about their sharing their PIA, PHI information. Similar way, anybody come across the data, because normally any administrator take over your remote for fixing some IT problem. So the basic thumb rule is there: administrator ask close all your application before you log into the system. This is one of the best practice which organization must deploy. So pretty much it's both end. I know system is not secure. There is a things are can be leaked. Apart from this, if awareness is not there, many point of time, if you're looking for the incident which happened, user was not aware that this is really important. They send it to their personal ID, they publish into blogs and all those things. So awareness is pretty much important. Whatever is has to do it, because we have although we have a lot of machine tools, everything is there, but endpoint is still human being, which has to, until unless that is not trained, our all tools and everything is cannot be 100% optimized. Apart from this, real-time monitoring is must. If something is really happening, then topmost security person should be get the alert and take the corrective hit right now, not like a weekly or monthly reconciliation when we are looking and looking for the things. So this will definitely help us in making the secure environment for us and similar for our customers.
Humans are the weakest link, Shishir, aren't they? Rohan, over to you, man. The same question.
That was an absolute wonderful question. And I just love how this panel discussion is flowing, because you started off with securing the perimeter. And then we started speaking about zero trust. Then we started speaking about MFA. Then we started speaking about remote workforce, behavioral sciences. Then we started speaking about authentication, on how important an IAM strategy is to an organization. And now we get to the crust of the problem, the data. Now, let me put it in common man's words, right? When you lock your house, when you leave your house, you lock your door. Now, you're not trying to protect the door. You're trying to protect the valuables inside your house. Now, even though you've locked your front door before you walk out of your house, I'm pretty sure that each of you or everybody on this webinar have got your valuables in another section of the house, again, stored within a lock and key. You might have your bank documents, your mortgage papers, your will stored in another secure section of the house. So even though you've locked the front door of your house, you still end up storing all your valuables in another secure section again, because what you're trying to protect is the assets, the values, valuable assets that's within your house. The same thing applies to organizations as well. Just by having an authentication system in place that authenticate to the cloud, you're not trying to protect the authenticity of the user. What you're really trying to protect is the data. You're trying to protect access to data because that's where the value lies. So that's where you have to not only look at who is entering your perimeter, you also have to look at who is accessing the various assets within your enterprise. And you need to have the ability to authenticate that user at that point in time. For example, if you're in a bank and I'm in my banking app already, I have logged in, great. I have VPN'd in, great. And I am transferring, let's say $100 between my savings account and checking account. Now that could be considered as a very low risk transaction and your policies could say, let it go through. But if I'm transferring, let's say an anomaly, $500 to a particular recipient who I have never transferred money before, your systems need to be able to identify that and capture that and ask the user to authenticate again. Or if you're transferring a high value transaction to an external entity, that needs to be identified again. So again, authentication is not really at the point of entry. It has to happen continuously. It's continuous authentication throughout the life cycle of that particular user's session or of that user's presence within your ecosystem. And in fact, my CEO, Hemendra Madalal, had this brilliant vision, and he came out with something called as authentication in a box. Now, organizations, when they try and deploy any kind of IAM strategy, it's a 2-week, 3-week, or sometimes a couple of months effort to deploy a single sign-on solution and integrate all applications together to ensure that you got single sign-on, etc. So what you need to also do is make it very easy for organizations to deploy a solution so that you can monitor not only who enters the perimeter, who signs on to your workstations, who signs on to your web applications, and who conducts a transaction online. And you need to be able to stitch them together so you know that the person who entered the perimeter is the same person who logged on to the workstation, is the same person who logged on to a single sign-on system, and is the same person who conducted a transaction within the organization's network. Now, when you have that ability to stitch all of them together, you have literally addressed every single discussion point on this panel, right from the time of perimeter access to behavioral sciences, to zero trust, to remote workforce, etc. So yes, securing your data is super important, and we need to move beyond this whole concept of user IDs and passwords, which we know has been the primary reason for cyber attacks today. Weak passwords, people writing passwords on sticky notes and sticking it on their laptops. Even enforcing a password policy where you have to change your password every 60 days, what do people do? They just prefix it by a 1 or a 2 or a 3. So if I have to change my password today, it's a long 12-character password. I go, oh my God, how am I going to remember this? Okay, today is May 12th. So whatever my previous password was, with May 12th at the end of it, right? So we need to move away from this entire world of passwords to a passwordless solution, but also keep in mind that we are not only securing the entry point, we also have to secure the entire journey of the user within the ecosystem, within an organization.
I wish that those days are near us, Rohan, the passwordless days, man. I wish. I know there's a long road ahead, but I love the energy and the passion with which you speak on passwordless authentication. I think there's still a long road ahead for a lot of us to kind of adopt that. But yes, thank you for that thoughts. I'm going to just move over to Ajit now. Ajit, Rohan spoke about the entire spectrum. I think the zero trust fits in very nicely with each of that spectrum, thing. So how does, you spoke earlier about, the identity and the access. How does zero trust really enable the identity and access?
So yeah, if you bring that together, right, Tarun made this point. So let me start with something that will help us all, anchor again, which is our organizations are going to be hybrid for a long time. right? We're going to have assets on-prem, we're going to have assets in the cloud.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
they're going to be hybrid for a long time. Yeah.
Right. So when you start thinking about activity and access that a user does on-prem and access that a user does in the cloud, that has to be unified, right? Because you want to understand someone's risk. For example, you suddenly access 3 new applications in the cloud, your behavior is changing. Now you're going on-prem, you're going to another authentication system, maybe Active Directory, and you're trying to access an internal application. I should be able to say, well, your behavior changed in the cloud and you're doing something different on-prem. Maybe you're a compromised device. So I want to force you, I'm going to raise the risk level and maybe do an MFA, because to Rohan's very important point, it's not just about saying you authenticate yourself, but I also need to know that something changed. So now I'm going to challenge you. And that's really what Zero Trust is saying. Zero Trust is saying there's a component of identity, there's a component of the endpoint, all of those come together, and it doesn't matter if it's on-prem, it doesn't matter if it's in the cloud, because we are not forgiven if somebody gets compromised in the cloud, right? It was still our responsibility. So Zero Trust is saying, let me unify these endpoints, these identities, give you one unified view, which is why I said that think about visibility first. That again goes back to the point of on-prem, we have identities that we haven't touched in years, right? There are stale identities that haven't been touched. Once you get that visibility, you reduce your attack surface, because now you could kill those accounts, those service accounts, those privileges, they're all gone. Because once you do that, the next phase becomes threat detection. And the thing that still hurts us, right? Credentials are 4 out of 5 breaches have something to do with credentials. That phase is all about threat detection, lateral movement. You know, even if you look at this breach, colonial breach that happened recently, the same challenge there was remote, there was a remote login, credentials were compromised, those credentials were used. So Zero Trust is saying, get visibility, then you can detect threats. Once you detect threats, you can start to say, okay, I know what my posture is. My third phase is going to be proactive policies. You did this, your role is this, you changed your behavior, I'm going to force an MFA. Because I know you authenticated in the morning, but in the afternoon, something changed. And now I want to challenge you. So what we're saying with Zero Trust is you have to start to build this plan where you get the visibility, you start to do threat detection, and then proactive policies. And then what we're going to find is we can actually predict very quickly when something bad is going to happen to us, because we know what is right in our organization. That's why this combination of identity and applications, we have to start thinking, no matter what we do, we have to start thinking like security people, not just identity people. And that's really going to help us.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But, sorry, we're going to limit it to identity. I know where you're going at, Ajit. Absolutely with you. We got to start thinking more security. And of course, identity, Zero Trust become a fundamental layers in each of the
right.
On the identity management side, one of the things which all of us kind of grope with is, what technology we really choose, right? And it's a factor of your organization, your sector, what you're really trying to do, et cetera, et cetera. But I just want to go around, asking everybody, given, if you are to choose an identity solution, what are the aspects which you would really consider when you choose a solution, right? So don't mention the vendor name. We want to be vendor agnostic, but what are those capabilities? What are those factors which we want to choose? Select in a product when you're looking for an identity solution. Maria, let me start with you first.
Yeah. So Gautam, very good questions. Partners have to do the job and do it well to support us. See, as CISOs and CIOs today, we look out for the best of the solutions and the next breed of best of the solutions today. See, when we are talking about solutions today, we would look at solutions which will give us peaceful nights, right? As people who manage assets, as people who manage IT environments and security for our organizations, I think we need to look at and partner with solutions which are the best in the industry. So we had looked at long time back also, and we have started looking at endpoints first. That is the point that we need to look at. And when we look at endpoints, we bifurcate them into 2 situations. One is your endpoints, which are the users who use it, and the other are the endpoints which are the server endpoints which people use. And these needs to be enabled with good security at them. So we want to strike the crowd, and we have done that. with solutions which are implemented with our partners who are part of this forum. I'm not naming them, but Ajit would have got the point which I made. And see, we have basically taken this action 2 years back. So when we have more work from home and possibilities that these are mixed type of working scenarios, we are at a very great comfort level. And believe me, Gautam, we have had situations of compromise. We have had situations of attacks coming in, and real life scenario where we have had good amount of results coming in. And I feel that is the success that we have gone through. Not only that, Gautam, today a lot of IT solutions are available in this direction, but you need to be very safe also along the area of implementing it. So I feel cloud-based backup is another point of view which we have made a strategic decision that whatever compromise or attack comes in, and even if they are successful, we need to be ready with backup solutions. Because today, no data should be compromised. Even if a data is compromised as in a lock, can we look at an alternative to install something on that same scenario so that nothing is lost? So I think that is some of the strategies one needs to take in forward. And I think identity access management is the need of the hour. And that is something you need to look at what stage you need to implement. Can you implement it at a starter level, or a mid-user level, or an advanced level? I think that one needs to really have a discussion with the partner who will take you through these steps and stages. Because if you implement something which is going to be a standstill for your organization, it is going to be a failure of your project. Yeah. So Gautam, these are my views.
Right. No, respect that, Mayor. Absolutely. Shrikant, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, but one more thing is the business the product should understand the clear business role. That is very, very important, and the right skill, skill
sets available. Yeah,
skill sets very, very important, and we should communicate to all the stakeholders, not only to the IT. There are a lot of other applications, shadow ITs and other ITs are running there. All the stakeholders should involve in this. That's what.
Sure, Shishir, do you want to add on to the the product capabilities or scenarios?
I would like to. If you're looking for any organizational structure, there are basically 2-3 stacks are there. Number one, data center. Number two, end user. Third one, every organization has adopted cloud up to some extent. So any solution which I am working on, there should be a single point of solution. We should work on my data center devices, my end user devices, laptop, or whatever, even mobile devices. A similar way, it should be compatible with any type of cloud technology. If any
cloud,
product
I was about right.
All my needs, then definitely that could be pretty much useful, and definitely the features which I am getting, it should be definitely customizable based on my need, because every organization based on their line of business, SOX, HIPAA, multiple compliance things are there, and as a compliance perspective, multiple report auditing and all these are required. So it should meet my compliance requirement for specific industry. That will be the best product for me.
Yeah. I've got a model for that, Shishir, and I'll talk about it once we go around the circle. I call it the 3C model. So I'm going to just talk about that. But Rohan, you had a point.
Yeah. So, I mean, here, a couple of things organizations do need to consider whenever they choose a product, whether they're trying to secure the perimeter or access control, or they're trying to choose a solution, is do they adhere to certain standards? Are they standards based? Are you going to be in a walled garden where you really can't integrate with other products? So you need to validate whether the product that you're choosing is interoperable with other products in the marketplace. Is the product built on the principles of privacy by design? Because privacy is very important, and people tend to oversee privacy a lot. Is the product based on standards? Is it certified? When I say certified, I mean, we are looking at lots of certifications out there. For example, there's a NIST certification, there's a FIDO certification, there's a certification for IBEDA, there's a FIP certification. So when you try and choose a product that is certified, that is based on standards, that's interoperable, and it's based on the principle of privacy by design, I would assure you that whichever product you're choosing or whichever vendor you're choosing would solve a lot of your organization problems as long as these 5 fundamental principles are met.
Absolutely, Ron. Well said. I'm just going to add a couple of things into this list, and I think we missed out a few over here. One is all organizations, have this service accounts. All organization, the product which you select should be able to manage service accounts as well. And believe me, gentlemen, service accounts are those hidden accounts which are probably hard-coded in systems or are being used by your IT teams in various aspects. And those have privileges. And believe me, those have privileges which you will be surprised. If you go and review those service accounts, they will have privileges which you will be really, really surprised. So the product which you select first has really, and there are products which can go, discover them. You have to integrate them within a product, right? And that is the tough part. So I would add that to the list. Shishir, to your point, said it should manage data center, endpoint, network, etc. Shishir, I'm just coming back to you. The model which I was mentioning is, what I call as the 3C model: cost, control, and convenience. Right. So Rohan is going to jump and say, "I will give you the convenience," but the cost and the control part is something which the CIOs, have to really take care of. Control can also mean compliance as well, right? So you can substitute that with the compliance, but in a lot of cases, I tend to believe it's more of a control. So the 3C model, it's a delicate balancing of the triangle, but each of the identity solution and implementation has to balance that 3C model. Shishir, Shrihari, sorry.
Yeah, right. So my list is actually very, very long. For last 20 years, I remember that in the year 2001, when I did study about this identity and access management, there is a presentation. Some of you may be knowing that there is something called NIS Plus or Yellow Pages, we call it, right? Which provides a very granular, access control, on the service accounts and all. I was thinking that it was going in the right direction, but none of these identity and access management solutions actually taken the spirit. So if you look at the OEM products that actually the banks use today, right? Typically, I evaluate at least some 2 to 3 different products actually, whether it could be fraud management or switch or some kind of card management, right? Anything. The most frustrating thing is actually that how they are managing the identities, right? You just neither they have the password complexity is missing, or they don't integrate with the central access identity management solution like ADA, etc. These are very trivial things, but today you have actually privilege and identity management solutions separate, Oracle type of identity management solutions are separate, and you have Active Directory solutions are separate. So and also you have consumer actually risk-based authentication, etc. Right? For the banks, etc. Those solutions are completely different. And the other point, what you are saying is actually the service accounts, right? How you are actually locally managing them. Again, they're separate. Even the privileged entity management also, you are creating some kind of generic accounts, you are managing it that. But you are actually not able to control the granular access of, each individual who is logging into this. So, there is a big scope actually, the identity is the fundamental for zero trust model.
It's a large scope, Shrihari, large scope.
Yeah, large scope. But, everyone is actually looking at a silo and actually, a specific product and they're developing it. But actually, they're not looking at the larger picture that what identity management can do.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a difficult situation because a lot of the OEMs are trying to address one part of this entire chain, Shrihari, which you mentioned. And therefore, to complete the whole spectrum, it's not just one solution which you need today. You may have to put at least 2 or 3 solutions to meet the whole spectrum of what you spoke about. And that's the tough part. But I can tell you that each of these solutions which are there are really very good in their own space, and they give you the value for what they are worth it. So yes, the integration of these 2 or 3 solutions becomes a bit of a challenge. Maybe managing vendors or OEMs becomes a bit of a challenge. But I do know if you get it right, each of these solutions can bring you the the value of money which you've put in. Tarun, I'm going to go across to you. Your thoughts on this part.
I think most of the discussions revolved around the identity and access management. I'll probably take a little bit tangent to this, right? While we talk about identity and access management, which is critical, really critical, but I think the product should evolve to imbibe a lot of learnings, as I call velocity checks, right? So Rohan spoke about somebody locking your bedroom with valuables, then a first gate and second gate and the perimeter gate and so on, right? This is essentially what I call as velocity checks, right? So along the way, the velocity checks should essentially be dynamic in nature, right? And most of the as we look at hybrid cloud, the need for speed becomes really critical.
Oh yeah.
Right. And therefore, I would probably look and see a solution which takes a bit of machine learning analytics into this entire gamut of identity and access management, plug it together to gives us the need for speed. How quickly can we look at detection, access detection and prevention?
Analytics key part, absolutely. Absolutely, spot on. So the solution needs to have a very strong analytics as well, behavioral based, as Tarun said. Ajit, your last thoughts.
Yeah, no. So the last, as we're coming to an end, right? It's becoming very clear that one, there has to be ease of deployment for us, so we can start to see it for us. But then we also have to start thinking about how to make it frictionless for our users. Because if we can make it frictionless for our users, then the adoption rates will go up. And when the adoption rates go up, people will become more security conscious. So as we look at solutions, we have to start thinking about how to make it frictionless for us and frictionless for our users. And if we can do that, then the solutions will get adopted and deployed faster and adopted quickly.
Absolutely, Ajit. I go back to my model 3C, cost, control, and convenience. The more if you increase the inconvenience, sometimes it takes the cost of the control away. So you have to balance that out. I've seen it in multiple places. Yeah, I mean, today technology, you're able to balance both convenience and control as well, which is really phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Gautam, another part which I just want to conclude on is this is the right time to ask for the right budget and the right, board level approvals for whatever you want in the world to get things done.
Yes.
Okay, all will be approved because the situations are challenging and organizations today need to be secure today.
Absolutely.
So this is one of the big points in our circle of life where we have good amount of investments going in cybersecurity.
Yes. Yes, Meher, spot on. Absolutely. There's a lot of investment happening in cybersecurity in the identity space as well. And which is really fantastic because, it helps improve the overall security posture for all organizations, help them, mitigate the risk of the, of the attacks, which is really, really very good. And I hope, I think this particular part has been left, it didn't get that much investment over a period of time, as much as it has got in the last couple of years. So I think there's a lot which still needs to be done. And I hope this trend continues, to be honest, because there is a lot which needs to be done in organization. Believe me, not everybody is secure even today. I still know clients, being in professional services, I still know clients where I feel, basic controls on identity and basic cybersecurity controls are really missing. And that, it just takes me by surprise that, we are sitting in 2021. How can you not have cyber and identity in place? So surprising, but I do still find, organizations which have basic controls in place. So yes, absolutely spot on. Thank you for that. I think with that, I'm going to end this panel. It was a pleasure talking to everybody. As you all concluded as well, identity is the need of the hour. Identity and access management is the need of the hour. More investment needs to go into this. A simplified solution which provides a frictionless, mechanism for users is something which would be really phenomenal. Thank you so much. I hope everybody is safe. Stay safe, gentlemen, until we connect again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Safe, everyone.
Thank you.